about less than 6 months away from another election, Mr. O'Neill, and the House has, by all accounts, had its own problems.
It sure has.
Check cashing and the rest. What advice have you had for Tom Foley and your congressional brethren?
Well, I have hopes and expectations that banking fiasco will be behind them before election time. It hit a wave, and the House is at the lowest ebb that it has been, and I hope that it passes. No American taxpayer was hurt by virtue of the bank. Very interestingly, when I got elected in 1952, the Republicans controlled the Congress. They took us downstairs. I think there were 11 or 12 Democrats, and they said, here, we don't allow overdrafts. Your salary is only $12,000. Sign these. Now, if you get down to $300, they automatically borrowed $1,000 from Riggs, and they put it in the bank for you, and you paid interest. And all that happened all through the years until 83 or 84. 83 or 84, Riggs says, we're losing money in this. We can't afford to do that. And then the fellow that was in charge of the bank says, hey, we get tons of money in here. We don't have to go to banks. We can borrow from ourselves. Well, everybody knew you could borrow from yourself, and it got out of hand, and it's really sad. I'm talking to a lady the other day, and she said, isn't it awful? She says, what's going on down there? Awful. She says, those free haircuts. Well, I said, in the House, you never got a free haircut, and the Senate stopped free haircuts in 1924. I said, I got a haircut in the barber shop the other day. It cost me $3 more than Frankie in North Cambridge cost me, who's my barber. So, Walt on the Cape. And they said, well, how about those $8.50 steaks? I says, you're entitled to those $8.50 steaks if you want to go in and eat them. The interesting thing, I said, that restaurant is out on consignment. People bid for that. That's not run by the government. That's not run by the Congress. That's run by a private concession. If he charges what he charges, an 8-ounce steak, to me it looks like a 3.5-ounce steak. But anyway, I said, you can have it. I said, I think you could buy it at any street corner in America. I said, if a fellow wanted to set up a place, he's got you trapped there. Thousands of people come through. There's no other place to eat.
That's right.
And he passes out these dishes. Not too good, but the price is right.
I ask you one other. What is your feeling on the vote of the women? Where do you think the women? Do you think the women is going to play a very strong role in the next election?
That's very interesting. I was talking the other day with. I just came up from Washington, but we spend about maybe 4 months a year there. And I go out with Ambassador Kaiser, and Ambassador Sherman, and 4 or 5 or 3 or 4 men. We meet about every 2 weeks just to keep ourselves briefed and to have something to do besides. And they're all knowledgeable and extremely intelligent. And the conversation was, well, it's a foregone conclusion. Clinton's the nominee. Where do you go from here? Well, I said, I like Bradley. Somebody else liked Kerry. Somebody else liked somebody else along the line. Somebody said Tsongas. And then they said, this is the year of the woman. I said, I thought a couple of years ago was the year of the woman. No, they said, this is the year of the woman. This is the year you ought to have a woman on the ballot. Not a bad idea. I was more responsible for Geraldine Ferrara being on the ballot than any other one person. I sat down in the Speaker's office with Mondale. And I said, I've got the woman for you, Geraldine. And the interesting thing about it, of course, at that particular same day, I tried to talk Mondale out of running for President of the United States. I said, you're going to be clobbered, you can't win. This guy's a hero in the eyes of the American public. You and I know how dumb he is, says Mondale to me. And I said, but the people don't, and the people love him, and you're going to get clobbered. You shouldn't be running. Everything is in timing. Wait 4 years from now, and you'll have a chance. And had he waited, he would have been the nominee, despite our Mike Dukakis or whoever was running. But I can remember being at the convention, and Geraldine was nominated, and I'm looking at my daughter Susan, and tears are pouring down her eyes. I said, what's the matter, Sue? She says, I have a daughter, Michaela. She said, Dad, do you know that in all the years you've said to Tommy, you said to Kip, you said to Michael, someday you can be President of the United States, Never once did you ever say to Rosemary or Susan, someday you can be President of the United States. Geraldine has broken the barrier for her, and I can say to my Michaela, someday you're going to be President of the United States. Is there going to be a woman President of the United States? Hey, you got so many bright women running for the United States Senate this year. The two girls out there in California, what's his name?
Boxer and Feinstein.
Not Feinstein, the other one. I love
Boxer, Barbara Boxer.
Barbara, I love her. What a beautiful lady she is. She's talented, cute, beautiful, articulate, and believes in the things that I believe in. And I hope that she wins out there. Probably the most brilliant woman that I ever had an occasion to talk with, whom I didn't agree with her philosophy at all, was Maggie Thatcher, Margaret Thatcher. She got through addressing the Congress of the United States, and she turned to me and said, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to meet with your leadership. She says, I have some problems. And I said, sure. So I arranged the 7 Democrats and 7 Republicans, and we went up. And for 2 hours, she was alone combating us. I'm afraid of, she says, of the ugly protectionism out there. I can see the ugly head of protectionism rising. And she says, I think it's going to destroy the world. Danny Purcell was there, and Danny said, you're talking about protectionism? Yes. So I live in Florida. He says, the only thing we have in Florida, he says, is tourists and citrus, lemon, grapefruit, oranges. He says, you don't allow us to go to the EEC. You only take your oranges and grapefruit and citrus fruit from Spain and Portugal, and very, very few from Israel. John Murtha spoke out and said, I'm from Bethlehem. He says, you built $2 billion worth of stanchions in the North Sea. You wouldn't even allow us to bid. We may not have been low bidder, but you never gave us the courtesy. You want to talk to us about protectionism? One thing after another. But she was terrific. She held herself up for 2 hours. Said to me after, that's the greatest 2 hours I've ever had in the United States. Boy, they hammered her. And she hammered right back. Now, when America has a woman, I'm not talking about the philosophy end of it, I'm going to have a woman of her leadership capability. She has it. You're going to have a president of the United States.
Do you think that a woman should be vice president, or should at least run, or at least be looked at? I mean, I look in the newspaper every day.
Hey, I love the girl from Texas.
But I look in the newspaper every day, and you talk about John Kerry, you talk about Bradley, you talk about whatever those other guys are. And there's never a woman mentioned as VP, as a possible VP.
Wait a minute. You get more women run for the United States Senate than you've had in 100 years.
Yes, I know, but
and
we want it all.
most of them are going to do. Listen, darling. You're just moving along, okay?
Ann Richards is hot right now. Ann Richards might surface as a Democratic vice presidential nominee.
Well, they'd be from
Ann Richards.
That's what I'm talking about, Ann, yeah.
She can't. She's from Texas,
And I've had,
Bush
just
and
like
Perot.
Bush, but not like Clinton.
Clinton's not from...
Yeah, but he's from the South.
I think it'd be terrific. She'd help him carry the state.
Yeah, I mean, you need somebody from the Northeast. I mean, there seems to be... I mean, why aren't
Oh, let's
women's
stop being
names being
parochial and
thrown
let's try
out?
to get a winner.
Yeah, I mean, why aren't women's names being bandied about like the guys' names are being bandied
Because
about?
you have so... What's now and what are the women organizations centering on right now?
Abortion.
Huh?
Abortion.
Well, other than the abortion issue, they're centering on these
the Senate
women.
and the
Right.
Congress, yeah.
And
Yes,
this is
in
the greatest
Senate
opportunity
especially.
they've ever had, and it's the greatest
So what
candidates
you're
they've
saying,
ever
we're not
had.
ready for VP yet?
No, I didn't say that at all.
Oh, okay.
As
They're
I said,
concentrating
the Richardson.
Ann Richards.
Yes.
Ann Richards, I thought she was terrific at the convention 4 years ago, and I like her as an individual.
How do you think your colleagues from Massachusetts now, the congressional delegation, are going to fare in the primaries and elections coming up? Do you think some are stronger than others? Have you had a chance to look at many of those races?
Well, I think they're all going to win, to be perfectly truthful, excepting where you have the two thrown in together. Then
You don't see Mavroulis as being vulnerable?
oh, very vulnerable, no question about it.
You see him winning.
If the fellow is indicted, he's vulnerable. He's more than vulnerable. He has problems, and he still has problems. Certainly, I didn't want to talk about his problems. But with the problems hanging out there, that's the most natural thing in the world.
But you don't see
Although I don't think he defeated quite easily the candidate that ran against him the last time.
So you don't see a Republican winning any one of the 10 congressional districts?
But there's also a Democrat running, Barbara Hill. who was running against it.
In the
Who
primary.
is
In the
a high
primary.
Yeah, and I really
she's-
don't know.
and she's a
Well,
pretty-
you see,
she's
the
apparently
problem,
pretty-
we go back again to
Yeah.
money. What kind of money has she got?
Quite a
in
lot.
Has
Oh,
she really?
has.
Quite like
Yes.
she's getting the
if the
women's
indictment
money.
comes, Nick has got to fight all the way. There's no question about it.
I want to try and transition a little bit to look at some of the Cambridge memories that you might have. And if I may, I want to pull out a section of the book where you talk about going down to Washington as a college student at Boston College.
Yes.
And meeting Franklin D. Roosevelt
Right.
through the auspices of Missy LeHand. Now, Missy
Right.
LeHand is well known in political history as Roosevelt's chief secretary. What many people don't know is that she lived in this area and that you
Missy
knew her.
Lane, I lived at 74 Roger Street. Missy lived at 105, which actually is the third house over on the Somerville side. And I used to pal around with her brothers, and she graduated from Somerville High School and a business school or something, went to New York, met Roosevelt, was his law clerk or his secretary when he was a lawyer's secretary. When he became assistant secretary of the Navy, he brought her all the way along, governor, and he stayed. And by the way, she's one of the 5 people that Doris Stearns is writing about as the 5 most prominent women. What they didn't realize, a lot of people don't, she really played a part in decision making, which really hasn't been brought out there, because she's the only woman that traveled with the president everywhere he went. Now, you know, stories come out about the woman down in Georgia and all of the, but wherever he went, Missy always went along with him.
What became of her after Roosevelt died? Did she return to the area? Did she stay in Washington?
Yeah, no, she had a sister. They lived at 104. Mrs. Rochon was his sister.
So the family lived on Orchard Street while she was in the White House
Yeah,
with Roosevelt?
sure, many a time. As a matter of fact, I'm playing cards at a house one night with her brother and her father and the whole gang, the whole neighborhood gang, and I was going to Boston College, and I had an Aunt Molly living down in Washington. So I'm going down to visit my Aunt Molly. She says, come on over and visit me. And says, I'll introduce you to the president. So we went down over the road. Lenny Lampkin was with me. Danny Kelly was with me. And we stayed at my aunt's house. And I called her on the telephone, and she said, come over to see me. Well, the invitation didn't include the others, and they weren't that politically minded as I was as a kid, I guess. So took the streetcar, went over. White House looked exactly the same. I don't think there was a fence out in front of it in those days, but the little white box was there, and Marine was there, and I said, I'm Tip O'Neill. He said, come in, she's waiting. I walked inside. The girl said, sit down, Missy will be with you in a couple of minutes. No press around, no security around, no cameras around, no nothing. I mean, that's how the White House was in those days. And I forget who was in talking with the president at that time. It was, I think I mentioned it in the book. But anyway, I'll show you around the Capitol. And so she showed me around the Capitol, and she brought me in to see Roosevelt. I think it was Howe, may have been Howe or the other fellow was close.
Cordell Howe.
She brought me in to see the president, and the president is sitting in a chair, and he's got braces, you know, just, you know, a complete polio victim. Boy, I was so shocked. My chin hit my chest. It had to be a reaction to the president. That, you know, I was astounded. I couldn't believe it. I went out, never told Lenny Lampkin, never told Danny Kelly, never told my Aunt Molly, never told my father, never told anybody in the world that the president was in that type of shape. The next time I saw him was in 1940, and Morris Tobin said, would you like to meet the president at a rally at Braves Field? And then, of course, I knew what it was. They had a big banner all the way down. He was on Jimmy's arm, you know, and he always held the rail.
Yeah.
But the American public, the press in Washington, they were aware of the fact that he was a cripple, but they never would tell
Public
the
at
American
large
public.
didn't
Public had
widely
no
know.
knowledge of it
So
whatsoever.
What I'm sorry, but to get back to what do you think of it nowadays when you not only expect to know every toenail, you expect to see Lyndon Johnson's incision, and every single thing that anybody ever did is in the
Well, I
public
think it's
eye.
sad, to be perfectly true.
I think it's sad,
What's
too.
the ability of a man to be able to run the country? What is his program? What is his plans? Not the character of the man. Hey, I don't want to know whether he slept with this one or he did something else along the line. What can he do for America? That's what I'm
Right,
interested
actually,
in.
it didn't matter that Roosevelt had polio. The only thing about it was it showed how courageous he was. So it would have been, nowadays, people would think it was good. But it really, there was no...
He was a terrific individual.
There was no reason for us to know.
It's obvious from the book what you thought of Harvard University back in your impressionable days. We know that, or you describe your very happy days at Boston College. You remember the class
Well,
of
I want you to know
1936?
that I was a speaker at the 350th anniversary of Harvard University. I received an honorary degree from Harvard University. I was on the visiting of the public health school. I'm a visitor. I don't do much visiting for them, but I'm a visitor of the Kennedy Center. I helped Harvard University in many of the programs that it sought along the line. But the Harvard of today and the Harvard of the last 25 or 30 years is a lot different than the Harvard of 50 years ago when they had the line of snobbery there. And it was very, very difficult unless you had been registered at birth to get into the university, and they were a class beyond the rest of America. And actually, they didn't know, like President Bush, what was on the other side of the fence of the world of North Cambridge, where I came from, and things like that.
Well, Harvard has had a lot of honors bestowed upon it, but as a Boston College graduate, one of the greatest nights of my life was the dinner for you down in Washington, D.C. to celebrate your 50 years in politics.
That was a
very
great
generous
night.
of you to raise all the money for B.C. We had the President of the United States, the President of Ireland, Gerald Ford had come back, and a few others.
And that was beautiful. You know what's so beautiful about that? I think now there's $3.5 million in the O'Neill Scholarship Fund at Boston College, and we give about 20 scholarships a year.
Yeah, my only regret is that
you know, it's a scholarship
it's
a scholarship you can't apply for. You apply to go to Boston College, and then you say, I want to apply for scholarships, I want to apply for borrowing money, I want to apply for work. And they go over the list and they determine. And on that list now, gee, 3 old pals, the grandchildren of 3 old pals of mine who 50 years ago, 40 years ago, they were so well off that the family met adversity along the line. And gee, in my heart, I'm so thrilled that I'm helping, or we're helping at Boston College, the education of these kids whose grandparents were so good to me.
You went to Boston College at a very difficult time for this country during the early and mid-30s. What was it like in North Cambridge, and what was it like being a college student trying to get to campus, trying to get your work
Well, the
done?
interesting thing about it in those days, as a matter of fact, about if you were fortunate enough to graduate from high school, and there weren't that many that graduated, because at the age of 14, fellows and girls would go out and get their working certificate. And if you graduated from high school, rare was the girl that was in the college class. They, for the most part, were in the business class, taking classical typewriting and shorthands and things like that. And of those who graduated from high school, 3% went on to college. And for the most part, college was for the elite. A lot of girls went to the normal schools that we had to become teachers along the line. But other than that, there were very, very few going to Boston College. Now, when I went to Boston College, my first year, the tuition was $150. There were 1,000 students in 4 buildings. 65 years later, or 60 years later, the tuition, I think, is $23,000, and there's 118 buildings, and there's 14,000 students. And in the old days, the idea of the school was education, further education for the immigrant children of the Irish, the Italian, the Polish, the French Canadians, and people like that. The school has changed since then. Thank God for the state schools, as a matter of fact. I don't know how people can afford to go to the Harvards and the Tufts and schools like that.
You was born and raised in Cambridge, or at least raised in Cambridge.
I was born here, dear.
All right. And I was born and raised here. And we sort of like come from different worlds in Cambridge. Cambridge is very parochial. And, you know, I never knew about sort of like the religious wars that went on in Cambridge, or the wars between the Yankees and the Irish and the French and the Italians, and here's the blacks over here and their little corners over here, and the whole world seemed like they were fighting one another.
Well, I don't think that's exactly so. As I said, your light was along your parish. Now, in North Cambridge, there was a French church, the Notre Dame de Pity, and there was what they call the Irish church, where the Italians and everybody else went to. But the French church was a denominational church for the French people. And they had their own grammar school and their own high school.
In Riverside, there was the Irish called Kerry Corner.
Yeah.
And one said, well, this is one kind of Irish, and up in North Cambridge is another kind of Irish.
No
and
question about that.
All of that kind of jumbled up in my mind.
No, that's the process of America. As a matter of fact, when you were landed in the boat in the North End, which they call the Deros, where the Fitzgeralds and the Kennedys came from East Boston, when you made it good, you moved out. You moved to East Cambridge, and as you joined economically, you came to North Cambridge, and then you left North Cambridge and you went. I graduated from St. John's High School, which is North Cambridge Catholic today, 60 years ago? Yeah, 60 odd years ago.
And when you were there, was Red McGrill still the basketball coach?
Wait a minute, let me tell you.
Yeah, really, because it's interesting, because when I went on the city council,
other than Abby
it was very
Fitzgerald Kelly and Mickey O'Neill, whom I just saw, and Franny Brusso, there isn't anybody in North Cambridge that I graduated from high school with, and Millie graduated, my wife graduated with 60 years ago. There's none of us left. That's the way you when your people
evolution,
come. Well, wait a minute, it's evolution, of course, but when you come to a ghetto. You know, the people, my people came over here in 1845, brought over by the New England Brickyard Company, and the houses across the street on Bolton Street. The first ones to arrive were the Dorans. They arrived in 1829, brought over by the New England Brick Company. Now, when you were going to come to America, where were you going to come to? You were going to come to an area where the people came from Cork, where the people came from Mallow, where my people came from, and you were going to... that's how ghettos are. You go to where a friend is, and you're brought over for a specific job. They were actually brought here in servitude. The interesting thing about it, my grandfather was 13 years old when he came to this country. The first thing he did was buy a cemetery lot, which I have in Keith's funeral home now, because I expect to be buried over on Ringe Avenue. Millie says, I hate it over there because I can't stand the heat, and she says there's no trees there. But, but anyway, that's the nature. Now it's 60 years later. North Cambridge Catholic High School is now what St. John's was. We have the Millionaire Scholarship Fund there. And we're proud of it, to be perfectly truthful, and it's very interesting. I think 50% are black, 30% Puerto Rican. There may be 20% white. The majority are minorities. And tuition is high. It's $2,500, $2,800 or something like that. Mm-hmm. And our scholarship fund, I think, sends probably 10 a year or something like that. Tommy and Brian O'Neill, my son and my nephew, they are on the board with Sister Powers over there, and they do it. And the interesting thing about the blacks that are there, 51% of the blacks are not, or 80% of the blacks are not Catholics. The interesting thing, why do they go there? They go there for the discipline. They go there because they think the school is the type of a school that'll give them the upbringing that they want.
Well, the reason
that's human nature.
The reason I asked the question is because you became involved in the Cambridge political scene.
Right.
And at that particular time, there still was the elite of Brattle Street. I mean, they...
Well, let me just say this.
How did you get elected?
Now, I don't know whether the mayor will agree with me or not, but I would say that there were two people. We used to have town and gown fights.
Yes. Oh,
she was always on the side of the gown, see? And I was on the side of the town. But anyway, yes. There were two people who I think played as much a part as anybody else in changing that. One was Eddie Crane and the other was myself. And I'm Speaker of the local legislature. I got some interns and I said, let's make a study. I want to make a study of the economy of Cambridge. And I have made a study of the economy of Cambridge and my congressional district since the day I went to Washington. I want to know why the district takes, how many people are white-collar, how many people do this, how many people do that. The interesting thing I found that at MIT, there is 1.8 employees for every student at MIT. There is at Harvard University 0.87 employees for every student there. Now, when I'm talking about, well, how do you do that? They can't have that many professors. They, at MIT, they have lathe operators, they have security guards, they have chambermaids, they have waitresses, they have assistant professors, they have instructors. You put them all together, there's 1.5, better than 1.5 person in that compound that's a worker, not a teacher. 87 100% in Harvard. You had Radcliffe, you had Leslie, and you had the others the same. Do you realize what the economy, the educational institutions mean to the economy of this city? We couldn't live without them. Then I look at my congressional district, and I have 22 colleges and about 200,000 students. What's the biggest economy factor in the congressional district that I represent? Education.
Yeah.
And so I go down to Washington, and what do I want to do? Two things I want to do. I want to help the universities, and I want to help the hospitals, who are a tremendous factor in our education. But today, everybody is the same way. No matter where you elect a person, that person is there for the purpose of what can I do for the economy. And I'm going to go out to talk to Raytheon, and they want to talk about the Patriot. And I remember the Patriot as though it was yesterday when the military wanted to dam it and they wanted to shut it down. And they came down to me and they showed how it was working 25% of the time, 35% of the time. Now they were up to 60% of the time. Joe Adabo is the chairman of the committee. I called Joe Adabo in and I said, Joe, what's the story on this? His military said they don't need it. Pentagon doesn't want it. I said, look at the record, Joe. I said, they're now hitting 60%. And I said, the gentleman here tells me that they're going to hit 100%. And not only that, Joe, do you know that there's 8,000 people in Raytheon live in my district? He said, that's the best piece of equipment I've ever seen. No, did I do it because of the defense of America, or did I do it for the economy of the area? But nevertheless, it was done, and it worked out beautifully.
Well,
now, why are we talking like this?
Well,
All right, Don.
Let me just say.
And again, we've run out of time. Speaker O'Neill, thanks once again for joining us. Please join us next week for the third and final installment of our interview with Speaker Tip O'Neill. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you on Cambridge Inside Out.